And then there are no pages and but anyway, that was my. Well, when the board like the West Mountain,
Yeah, they can see you and they can, yeah. Oh, Angie, do you know if Marilyn is coming? Marilyn Malkin? She was here at the last one with you, I think.
What?
From the board?
I didn't think of her.
Okay, she's registered, but I don't know if she's coming. That's okay.
Okay.
I'm not gonna be in your way, am I?
No, no.
Well, that's today. Came from a weird family. Her mother talked like we'd say the same thing 3 times. And her sister, I read the first chapter. Oh, you know, yeah, I did. It's intriguing. Hello. Hi. How are you? I'm good, and you? Very well, very well. I'm looking forward to it. For me, it's a new. Maybe when you fit the something, there's a book. You had one session on the one that I did in February, she reviewed Champagne letters. Yeah. I can't remember who it was, they did, I turned it because of the snow or something, they moved it by the week, but there's like. I remember it was law. Okay, what question maybe? No, you don't have to send it to me, just give me the time. I'll have to, because you wanna know what I thought. It's Victoria. They put it on my social media, like I said, and person signs up, so.
Yeah,
It's hard when it's a new program.
It's on the email or the website.
Yeah, the newsletter. All right,
What
I
if-
think we might as well start. If people
Yeah.
come in late, they come in late.
Yeah, so you tell me when you turn it on. So is it on already?
Yes.
Oh,
That's okay. They're just watching us, right? I just think these. Okay, everybody, did you get your schedules sorted? We're good. We want to start.
So, we're going to start.
Welcome, everyone, to our second Books and Bites. I hope that you enjoyed our first one. If you missed it, you can watch it online. Danielle had reviewed the Champagne letters, and today we have, for the first time, Jennifer Eisman reviewing Peggy.
And for those of you who, as Maria just said, who missed the first one, you can catch it on our YouTube channel, which is on our website. And today I'll be doing the second in the Books and Bites series, and then I'll be followed by Maria Racina, who's doing Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins. And they're on the little bookmarks around the room, the Books and Bites. And the final one will be our library director in October. And I think she is doing Like Mother by Susan Rieger, which is a family saga exploring 3 generations of women. So in total, there's 4 of the Books and Bites series. So today I'm going to be reviewing the book Peggy by Rebecca Godfrey. This came out in 2024, and it's about the fictional accounts of Peggy Guggenheim's life. I had never heard about this book until I saw it on the CBC website for their list of 24 Canadian fiction and books to read in fall of 2024. And because I love art, I wanted to know more. And for those of you who don't know me, I do have a degree in art history, as well as a few undergraduate degrees as well. And I know it seems like a very long time ago, but at the time, my specialty was Renaissance art, Baroque art, classical architecture, ancient manuscripts, textiles, and things like that. So everything except modern art. And if you had asked me at the time if Andy Warhol's Campbell Soup was art, I would have probably told you absolutely not, because my background was everything classical and not modern. And when I was trying to graduate, graduated from McGill, they didn't have enough classes for me to be able to graduate in time. So I said, I'm gonna take some summer classes to be able to graduate, not to come back in the fall. Any guesses as to what they were offering in the summer, the only classes? Modern art, introduction to modern art, of course, is luck would have it. And of course, I knew nothing about art, modern art, sorry. So I had to eat some humble pie because by the end of it, it actually wasn't so terrible. I actually did learn a lot about modern art in general. And I don't know if I'll ever really agree if Andy Warhol is my definition of art, but again, that's just me. So it was this new appreciation for modern art that I wanted to pick up the book by Peggy Guggenheim. She's such a towering figure in the art world, and I couldn't help but want to know more about this person. And if I'm being honest today, it was a little bit embarrassing graduating to art history degree and not knowing anything about modern art. So clearly, it was time to learn more about this person. I've heard a couple of comments around the room already. Has anyone read the book? Partially, a bit. Nobody. Does anyone know who the author is? Have you read anything by the author? Yeah. So then the first question is, who is Peggy Guggenheim? So if you'll bear with me a little bit of a whirlwind to get us all situated. Marguerite Peggy Guggenheim was an American collector and patron of modern art. Guggenheim's personal collection was comprised of Cubist, Surrealist, and abstract expressionist works by American and European artists. She acquired a significant portion of her collection in London and Paris between 1938 and 41, and later in New York between 1941 and 46. Today, her collection is part of a larger network of museums managed by the Solomon Art Guggenheim Foundation and is housed in the Palazzo Venier Leoni in Venice, which was her home from 1948 until her death in 1979. So Guggenheim, as some of you have already mentioned, was the daughter of Benjamin Guggenheim and Florette Siegelman, both of whom were independently wealthy. The Siegelmans were successful New York bankers, and Guggenheim made their fortune in the mining industry in the late 19th century. After spending her childhood in New York in 1921, Guggenheim moved to Paris. There she met her husband and artist Laurence Vail, and they led a bohemian life and developed friendships with avant-garde artists, including Constantine Brancusi and Marcel Duchamp. Duchamp in particular would play a central role in the development of Guggenheim's personal collection in the late 1930s. The beginning of Guggenheim's career as a collector dates to 1938, when she opened the Guggenheim Djuna Art Gallery in London and began purchasing works by artists. Her friend Samuel Beckett urged her to dedicate her life to contemporary art as a living thing, and Duchamp introduced her to artists and taught her, as she put it, the difference between abstract and surrealist art. Due to financial difficulties and the onset of war, this first project of the Djuna Gallery was short-lived, and the gallery closed in the following year. Her motto was, technical malfunction there. The threat of war caused instability in the Parisian art market and created unique opportunities for the collector to acquire art at reduced prices. Guggenheim acquired works at an incredibly fast rate until 1941, when the German occupation of France finally forced her to return to the United States. And she's quoted as saying, as you can see on the screen, "My motto was buy a picture a day, and I lived up to it." This is unheard of in today's art market. You can't purchase art the way she did, but really the drastically reduced prices, it's unheard of in today's market. During the turbulent years in Paris, Guggenheim purchased the major part of her European collection. Among the works now exhibited in her Venetian home are many examples of Cubism, including Georges Braque, the clarinet, which you can see on the screen, Fernand Légaré Men in the City, and Picasso, the poet. Other highlights from the collection include Constantine Brancusi's Bird in Space, which is the sculpture you see in the middle, which is sort of interesting that she collected this piece. If you know anything about her life and what she tried to accomplish, she was constantly moving forward, going forward. And it's interesting that this particular piece, which she's very fond of, is sort of, if you can bear with me for a second, is this trajectory, this path sort of going towards space. It represents sort of movement going forward. So it's very interesting that she thought this, because it represents a lot of things in her life, the idea of moving forward and achieving everything that she did. You can also see she's acquired Salvatore Dali's Birth of Liquid Desires. If any of you know Dali's work, it looks like liquid that just hits the canvas. That's the little one, the second one, the right-hand corner. She also acquired Jackson Pollock's Alchemy, and then many others. She astonished Ferdinand Lagallé when she bought his men in the city on the day that Hitler invaded Normandy, and she acquired Brancusi's Bird in Space as the Germans approached Paris, and only then decided to escape the city to the south of France. So she was really, really dedicated to this passion of collecting art. In October of 1942, Peggy opened her museum gallery, Art of the Century in Manhattan. The gallery consisted of innovative and visually compelling exhibit rooms, and soon became the most innovative venue for contemporary art in New York City. She gave Jackson Pollock the first of 4 solo exhibits there, and she actively promoted and sold his paintings and commissioned his largest, which you can see on the screen, called Mural. So it was really important. What was really important about this is that she encouraged all these avant-garde artists and gave them a spot to exhibit their works. Peggy and her collection thus played a vital role in the development of America's first art movement of international importance. She would later name her discovery of Jackson Pollock as her greatest discovery above anything that she's ever done, including all the collections that she amassed in her lifetime. Yeah. In 1947, she returned to Europe, eventually settling into the Palazzo Venier dei Leoni, which is the unfinished Palace of the Lions, which you can see this beautiful home. I can't imagine living here, sailing up to the front door, and this is my home. And it's situated on the Grand Canal in Venice, of course it is. I had trouble deciding which picture to actually put up on the screen. There's some that are basking in the sunlight and the sunset. I mean, what a life. The following year, she exhibited her collection at the Venice Biennale, presenting for the first time in Europe people like Mark Rothko and Jackson Pollock. And in 1951, she began opening her home during the summer months, this home here actually, to allow visitors to see her collection. She donated the entirety of her collection in 1970 to the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation. And the Peggy Guggenheim collection opened to the public in 1980, which is a year after her death. So that's just a bit of a whirlwind overview of who she was and everything that she's accomplished in her life. And because, yes.
Is that still the Guggenheim home in Venice?
I don't believe so. I believe it's not. I believe it's just the collection. Some of the collection is there and it's open to the public and you can go and visit it. Yeah. But I can't imagine even living there. And doing the research for this presentation, you see some of the pictures inside her home. I mean, it's amazing. She has, she was saying in some of the historical documents I was reading, she has a silver bed frame that was made for her by an artist, Matthew Calder. Is this gorgeous silver bed frame. I can you imagine having all of this in your house. Literally, her whole collection was in there. Because I love art and architecture, if you'll permit me a small little segue into the history of the Palazzo, because it is so fascinating. The story behind the Palazzo, that's the model for it there you see on the left, is the Veniers, which is a noble Venetian family, commissioned the architect Lorenzo Moschetti to design a 5-story palazzo perched on the Grand Canal. Unfortunately, extenuating circumstances hindered the project's construction, and the single-story palazzo was left unfinished, is what you see today. Over the years, it was sold to different owners and became known in the neighborhood as the Palazzo Non Finito, so the unfinished palace, unfortunately. And it actually may have been demolished, erased from history, except for the 3 women who came to inhabit it in the 20th century. And they did so with a sense of style and sense of female entitlement that is unheard of to the original Venetian male owners in the 1700s. The first of these owners, I'm just going to talk about her because she's so eccentric. That's her on the screen in full costume, was Louisa Casati. She came to the Palazzo in 1910. Louisa was one of the wealthiest women in Italy, having inherited her family's industrial fortune. As the wife of Marchese Camillo Casati, she was aligned to the highest ranks of Italian nobility. Yet after following under the spell of the notorious writer and connoisseur Gabriel D'Annunzio, which you see on the screen, Louisa turned her back on conventional society and with a passion that bordered on profound eccentricity, vowed to turn her life into a work of art. Venice was to be her theater and the romantically derelict Palazzo her stage. Further evidence of Louisa's maverick taste was revealed in the menagerie of pets that she began to gather around her. She had parrots, monkeys, snakes, peacocks, a flock of albino blackbirds that she would occasionally dye different colors to even suit her mood. And the most beloved of these pets actually was Cheetah. And I did actually find a historical photo, which I want to put up on the screen and share with you, but unfortunately it's too grainy for me to actually get a good pixel to be able to put up on the screen. But it actually is, I thought it was fake, but it really was a historical fact. There was the cheetah front and center in front of all the parties. So like a Lady Gaga of the earliest 20th century, she disdained conventional vanity, attending the opera in a dress of swan's down that molted as she moved, or with fresh chicken's blood dripping down one arm. She went to parties dressed as Medusa, wearing a headdress of snakes, like Lady Macbeth, with a waxed bloodstained hand attached to her throat. But of course, Louisa's money was not infinite, and in 1924, she was forced to relinquish the Palazzo. 12 years later, it was acquired by the Lady Doris Castelrose, a London socialite who wanted to transform it from its rundown ruin into a smart cosmopolitan salon. So the building changed hands several times before it came into Guggenheim's possession, and she would make it a place of permanent residence. And I just wanted to give you, as you said, a sense of the history behind this building, because with everything that Peggy did in life, it was so fitting that she ended up in a building that represented a lot of what her character was about. So I just wanted to share that a little bit with you. So, on to the book. Like what you've been waiting for. Rebecca Godfrey was an award-winning novelist and journalist. Her books include the 2001 novel The Torn Skirt, which was shortlisted for the Ethel Wilson Fiction Prize, and the award-winning true crime story Under the Bridge, which came out in 2005 and won the British Columbia National Award for Canadian Nonfiction. Peggy is her final novel and is a work of historical fiction which represents a complete departure from her other works. Rebecca Godfrey was quite an accomplished author with a bright career that's tragically cut short when she was diagnosed with late stage 4 lung cancer in 2018, and she subsequently died in 2022 at the age of 54. So she actually died before she was able to complete this novel. Her friend Leslie Jamison completed the fictional account of Peggy Guggenheim's life based on Godfrey's notes, lengthy conversations between the two writers, and notes that she dictated to her husband Herb in the last days of her life. So the fact that the novel exists at all is just a testament to all the work and efforts of everyone involved, including all the editors. The first part of the novel, the first two parts of the novel were written by the author, and the third part was actually written by Leslie Jamison. And this could sort of explain a little bit the difference in writing style for those of you who are able to make it through the whole entire book. And it feels why the book may feel a little bit different towards the end of it. Even though the author left Jamison her notes, you sort of have to wonder if the ending was exactly how the author herself would have wanted it written. So the question I have for you is, does that really matter? Does it make a difference? Rebecca Godfrey, for those of you who did make it through the book, I always am a fan of reading the author's notes at the back of the book. That's where you learn a lot of information about the book itself, the author, the storyline. So Rebecca Godfrey was very clear that she wanted the book to be completed. She didn't want it to come out as a abridged form or with an author's note at the end saying, you know, that the author had passed away, which I know as a reader, I personally really appreciate and like having a story that sort of wraps up at the end. There's some sort of conclusion. And I don't have to work too hard for my endings. I don't know if that's the same for most of you at the table, but I don't like those endings that are sort of vague or I have to fill in the blanks. Yeah, I can agree. Yeah. I don't want to have to work that hard in my opinion. It's impossible, of course, to say how, this version of Peggy compares to the version that kept Godfrey going for more than a decade's worth of writing into her last days. As it stands, Peggy is a compelling work with a sharp reminder of just how much we have lost. The author's vision was that the book would exist in 3 parts. The first being Peggy's adolescence, and that may be why you had trouble with the first part, because that's when I picked it up the first time, I thought I made a mistake with the book I picked up, and we have to put these up at the beginning of the year, and then we tell you, the public, what we've chosen. And I thought, oh no, I picked the wrong thing, and I had to come back to it. And I think that was my problem with the first part, is because as a mature person, you're reading the part 1, and it's a much, much younger voice. Yeah, voice of a young girl. So that could maybe be why it was hard for you. Yeah, I think so.
Oh, no.
The second part picks up with her in Paris and her artistic coming of age. And the third part focused on her love affair with Samuel Beckett and the opening of her art gallery and a small view of what happens in Venice and what happens to Peggy there. And Rebecca, as I mentioned, had left Leslie Jamison enough clues and materials to what to do at the end of the book. And Leslie Jamison has actually said in an interview that she had to leave her life in the States behind and go to Venice and immerse herself in the Peggy experience in order to finish the book. So she actually had to go to Venice to write the book. In that mind frame. So let's talk more about the novel. As I mentioned, it's rooted in Godfrey's imagined version of Guggenheim's voice based on Peggy Guggenheim's scandalous memoir, Confessions of an Art Addict. And the novel begins with Peggy's privileged childhood in New York City. And things really begin to change when her father sort of decamps to Paris, and then his subsequent death in 1912 on the SSS Titanic. So, which is a fact I didn't realize. Is it a true story? This is a work of fiction based on Guggenheim's life. So there is some artistic license, but not as much as I thought, which when I picked up the novel. Subtly woven throughout the book is Peggy's relationships with her sister, Benita and Hazel, and how the two are very different. Peggy's bond with Benita is marked by a sort of a mutual kind of recognition. They aren't actually the same, but Benita understands Peggy's rebellion and emotional vulnerability better than Hazel does. While Benita is more traditionally accepted by the Guggenheim standards, she doesn't judge Peggy as harshly as others in the family do. Hazel, the younger sister, represents everything that Peggy doesn't want to be: obedient, polished, proper, basically. She is adored by their mother, Laurence, and she's pretty much the favored child, which cuts Peggy rather deeply. Hazel gets all the attention, the praise, and the approval, and Peggy is sort of treated as a family oddity. In the book, the character of Peggy does feel strongly about her family's wealth and Jewishness, and these aspects of her identity play significant roles in shaping her worldview and her behavior. Peggy's awareness of her wealth or her family's wealth, I should say, can be seen in how she navigates the social environment around her, and it adds a layer of complexity to her character. She's acutely aware of the privileges that wealth afford her, but she also grapples with the expectations that come with it. The tension between the material comfort of her upbringing and the darker realities she faces creates this sort of very layered, multifaceted character. Similarly, Peggy's Jewish identity is also important part of her sense of self. The novel touches on themes of belonging, tradition, and the complexities of cultural heritage. Peggy's relationship to her Jewishness, much like her feelings about wealth, is complex. It shapes her interactions with others, influences her sense of alienation at times, or connection with her family and her community. In essence, Peggy's relationship with both her family's wealth and Jewishness is part of what makes her a conflicted and compelling character. It adds depth to her internal struggles and helps to explain some of her more impulsive or provocative actions throughout the novel. Peggy struggles with school and fitting in the uptown upper class. We see this in part 1. She finally finds her place when her cousin Harold Loeb helps her land a spot at her first job in the Sunwise Turn bookstore which introduces her to an international bohemian world. She joins that world when she moves to Paris in 1920. There she mentioned, as I mentioned before, she marries the writer Laurence Vail and begins her patronage of the arts, supporting such writers as Djuna Barnes and Emma Goldman as they wrote. I just wanted to point out on the screen that the Sunwise was an actual bookshop that existed in New York City and served as a literary salon and gathering place for people like Peggy Guggenheim, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Theodore Drescher, Robert Frost, Harold Loeb, as well as many, many others. It was founded by Mensch Jensen, who you see, that's the lovely lady you see on the screen, and Mary Mowbray Clark in 1916 and operated until 1927. The reason why I wanted to share this with you is that we're in the library. It is one of the first bookshops in America to be owned and operated by women. So that itself I thought was pretty interesting fact to be able to share with you. Writing in a lean hard prose, Godfrey captures both the intense highs and staggering lows of Guggenheim's life, which Peggy views through the lens of the curse upon her family. As she explains to her sister Benita, I have this belief that we are cursed when we were born. The three sisters of the Silver Prince. First the father will die, and then one by one the sisters. Given what happens to Peggy in the story, it's difficult to argue this point. Hopefully that encourages you to pick it up and read it through to the end. The novel reaches its emotional climax in its final section, which follows not only Peggy's establishing of the Guggenheim Jeune, her first gallery in London, but also her intense involvement with Samuel Beckett, whom she meets at a party in Paris hosted by Nora and James Joyce. Yes, the James Joyce. So her circle of friends is quite large. The novel Peggy, as I mentioned already, is structured in 3 parts to highlight the complexity of the main character Peggy and to explore the differing perspectives on her life and actions. By dividing it into 3 sections, God would give readers the opportunity to see Peggy's from different perspectives and different viewpoints, which helps deepening her understanding of her character and the events that unfold around her. While this is a work of fiction, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment and talk about some of the historical characters that are actually featured in this book, and there are many. Rebecca Godfrey is known for her deep, nuanced storytelling, often blending fact and fiction to explore complex characters and hidden truths. Peggy follows this signature style. It's rich, character-driven narrative with psychological depth and a strong sense of place. Here are some of the notable historical characters featured in the novel: James Joyce, Man Ray, Mensch Jensen, Samuel Beckett, Harold Loeb, who actually is her cousin in real life, Jean Cocteau, Djuna Barnes, and Emma Goldman. So Jean Cocteau, who there he is in the upper left-hand corner, he was an actual French poet, filmmaker, and artist who was known for his avant-garde creativity. His presence in the novel connected to themes of the imagination, art, and self-mythologizing. Peggy's fascination with figures like Cocteau underscores her own desire to create and reshape her identity. Harold Loeb, I don't know if you can see him, he's in the bottom picture at the back with the spectacles. That was the only historical image that I can actually find of him. He pops up in the novel Peggy for good reason. His historical significance may not be widely recognized as some people like Ernest Hemingway, but Loeb very much was part of the literary and cultural movement of the 20th century. He was deeply embedded in that whole lost generation culture, which was those American expats who went to Paris in the 1920s. He was close to Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, as well as others. It's really interesting to note here, he was actually, Harold Loeb that is, was the inspiration for the character Robert Kahn in Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. So there is a lot of historical significance to all the characters that you see in the book. In Godfrey's novel, Loeb is so more than just a name drop. He actually has a very important presence. He represents the larger cultural and literary network that Peggy is drawn to, and he's part of her gradual awakening for realization that she did more of life. The novel includes references to various other artists, writers, and thinkers of the 20th century, reflecting Peggy's search for meaning and connection. These figures often serve as symbols of artistic and intellectual freedom that Peggy longs for. These historical figures aren't then just, I would say, historical background figures. They actively shape Peggy's thoughts, her decisions, and her struggles. And they serve as role models and sources of intellectual stimulation, and even as symbols of the different paths you can take in life. Before I leave this slide, that character in the middle, the second image from the left over, is Laurence Vail. And because he features so heavily in the novel, it would be remiss of me to not say anything about him. He was her first husband, Peggy Guggenheim's first husband. He was born in Paris in 1891 to American parents. He studied in France, he moved to England, studied literature at Oxford, and upon returning to Paris, he wrote essays, he translated essays, he did painting, he did sculpting, he did collages. So he actually did many artistic things. In the late 1920s, he was considered a main figure of Paris's flourishing intellectual and social circles, to the extent that he became known as the King of Bohemia. He associated with writers and artists, including Marcel Duchamp and Man Ray. And in 1922, he actually married Peggy Guggenheim. They had 2 children, Keegan and Sinbad. And in 1932, Vail started writing the only novel that he ever wrote, which is called Murder, which is unfortunately a cutting satire on his marriage. So the marriage, actually, for those of you who read the book, had its ups and downs, to say the least. And at times, the novel predicts it, shows him as cruel and abusive. The tumultuous marriage was marked by physical and emotional violence. And it is important to note that the author's portrayal of Laurence Vail does align with historical accounts of their relationship. And he did subject her to years of derision and abuse, if I can say it that way. So you're probably thinking, why would someone like Peggy Guggenheim stay with someone like Laurence Vail? So a quote from Peggy's own autobiography, Out of the Century, in 1979, may give you a hint as to why that was. He was about 28 at this time, and to me, he appeared like someone out of another world. He was the first man I knew who never wore a hat. His beautiful, streaky golden hair streamed all over as the wind caught it. I was shocked by his freedom, fascinated at the same time. He was like a wild creature. He never seemed to care what people thought. So does anyone want to hazard a guess as to why Laurence Vail so mistreated her throughout their life? Any thoughts? Guesses, opinions? Sorry. Okay.
It's because of the social standing, it bothered him.
Yeah, very much so. His cruelty to Peggy Guggenheim seems to be a stem of personal, psychological, and societal factors at the time. Though Rebecca Godfrey in her novel paints him less as a straightforward villain and more as a product of his time and temperament. So a couple of reasons as to why he so mistreated her could be that idea of toxic masculinity and power struggles. He embodied that 20th century Bohemian male artist stereotype. You know, he was charismatic, he was brilliant, but also deeply controlling and emotionally volatile. In a time when women were expected to be subservient, Peggy's independence and growing assertiveness probably threatened his ego. Yeah. A couple of other things. There was professional jealousy. Yes, he was known as the King of Bohemia with everything that he did, little dabbles here and there. But her star was also rising, and she was becoming known as the Empress of the art world. So I don't know, King of Bohemia, Empress of the art world. I think there's a little bit of jealousy and a lot of probably uneven, resentment. There was also, if you read the book, there was a heavy dependence on alcohol. Historical records and Godfrey's portrayal both suggest that Vail had a volatile temperament, which could have been worsened by substance abuse. And these likely exasperated his violent outbursts and his erratic behavior. There was also this idea of personal dysfunction. Vail was viewed as this part of this larger cultural movement that often, unfortunately, romanticized self-destruction and chaos. So it's like that, if you will, that artistic ideal, which doesn't really mesh with real relationships, unfortunately. And there's also a lack of consequences. At the time, society largely excused or ignored, unfortunately, domestic violence, especially among the wealthy or artistic elites. And so this lack of accountability allowed men like Vail to act really cruelly and without facing serious consequences. The novel makes it clear that while Vail had this charm, magnetic charm, his treatment of Peggy was actually quite devastating in the novel and according to historical accounts. But the novel doesn't excuse his behaviors. It's really important to say that. Rather, it just situates for you, the reader, in that time frame of what you're reading. So it makes it a disturbing but a very layered portrayal. For a young woman looking to escape the rigidity of her life, her upbringing, her wealth, he probably represented, you know, freedom and sophistication. And for those of you who can get through the book, very quickly she realizes the solution just sort of crumbles away, unfortunately. In Peggy, male historical figures like James Joyce, Marcel Duchamp, and Samuel Beckett play a significant role in shaping the novel's themes and the protagonist's intellectual journey, if you will. First, there is James Joyce. We see him there on the far left. He is best known, obviously, for his work Ulysses and a portrait of an artist as a young man. He was a literary innovator who used stream of consciousness narration to capture the complexity of human thought. So Peggy, like Joyce's protagonist in the story, wrestles with identity, personal history, and often reflecting on her own experiences in a way that blurs the past and present. Another male figure in the book is Marcel Duchamp, who is an avant-garde artist who challenged traditional notions of art and creativity. So Peggy reflects on Duchamp's philosophy of art is about perception rather than inherent value. So this resonates with her own struggle to define herself. Does identity come from within, or is it shaped by other people's perception of you? The significance is Duchamp's rejection of artistic norms parallels Peggy's desire to reject societal norms. She doesn't just want to fit into predefined notions of what a woman should be at the time, just as Duchamp refused to conform to conventional ideas of art. Samuel Beckett, he's the last figure on the screen, best known for his work, obviously, Waiting for Godot, explored existential themes such as isolation, the passage of time, and the absurdity of human existence. Peggy experiences moments of deep existential reflection, much like Beckett's characters who want to find meaning in a seemingly indifferent world. She often struggles with waiting for something to happen in life, mirroring the uncertainty in Beckett's works. So much like Beckett's characters, Peggy must confront the idea that life may not offer clear answers, but meaning can still be found in those small little moments, which is what most of us as adults sort of have to do in life. The second part of the novel opens with a quote from Emma Goldman. She's the one on the left with the eyeglasses. Does anyone know who Emma Goldman is? Yeah. Good for you, because I had no clue. I had to actually look her up. I have to admit, I had no clue who she was. Yeah, yeah.
She was the anarchist.
Yeah, exactly. She played a crucial role in the novel Peggy, influencing the protagonist's ideas about freedom, rebellion, and the female autonomy. She was a radical anarchist and a feminist. She represented bold action, defiance against social norms, and a belief in self-liberation, all of which, of course, resonates with Peggy at this point in the book. She rejected traditional expectations for women and fought for the rights of women to love, think, and live freely. Peggy, much like Goldman, struggles with societal expectations and the pressures to conform. So Emma Goldman believed that love should be free and not bound by societal constraints. She rejected the idea that women should be submissive in relationships, and Peggy often throughout the novel struggles with what love should look like. Should she follow the traditional ideals of romance or forge her own path? Goldman's views may challenge Peggy's own experiences with love and relationships, making her rethink what she truly wants. For example, one of the things I was researching for this, she says in an interview, I think this is obviously several years later, an interviewer sort of asks her, how many husbands have you had? And she wittingly replied, do you mean mine or other people's? So clearly she has forged her own path by this point, moving away from this traditional view of what marriage should be. The other figure on the screen is Djuna Barnes. She appears in the book as one of the many artists and writers circulating in Peggy Guggenheim's orbit. She was fiercely independent, enigmatic, modernist, best known for her novel, The Nightwood. Has anyone heard of this work, this literary work? Nope, neither had I. Had to look it up. This is a work that's celebrated for its lyrical style and exploration of gender and sexuality and trauma, which was revolutionary at the time in 1936. She and Peggy moved in the same avant-garde expat Parisian circles in the 1920s and 30s. Their real life relationship was marked by both friendship and conflict. Peggy Guggenheim supported Barnes at times, but Barnes could be difficult and very harsh. And Peggy Guggenheim Godfrey, captures this tension, portraying Barnes as both brilliant yet troubled figure who embodies the struggle of the artistic class that Peggy wanted to. Their interactions in the novel highlight Peggy's role as both an enabler and a savior, showing her complicated relationship with artists she championed. In the novel, Barnes is portrayed as sharp, often cool observer whose wit and bitterness cut deeply into those around her. So this dynamic is fascinating because it reflects Peggy's larger struggle, if you will. She wants to be part of this intellectual artistic movement, yet she often finds herself wounded by the very people that she's trying to support. So Barnes embodies this paradox, if you will. She's both brilliant and toxic, a friend and a saboteur. So the question becomes, do you feel that Peggy saw Barnes as a necessary evil in her world, or as a true friend? Something to consider as you read the book. It was very difficult to find interviews with the author because, as I mentioned, she had passed. However, I did find one that explains how she became interested in writing the story about Peggy Guggenheim's life. So she was saying that after the book Under the Bridge, which features a true crime, she was approached by a few editors to do some writing for some magazines and investigative storytelling. But she says that she was really haunted by that true crime and the kids in the story, because it's kids who committed murder. And so she was very, very haunted, and she just wanted to move away from that. She had an idea of writing a love story. And she wanted to do something different because she was being tagged as bad girls. So she wanted to get away from that impression that the public was becoming, starting to have her. She also says her grandmother had just died, so she was cleaning out her house. And in her closet, lo and behold, she found the autobiography of Peggy Guggenheim, Confessions of an Art Addict. And so as she was reading it, she was thinking, well, how do I don't know who this person is? How come I've never heard of her, what her story is? The fact that she was involved with these modern women, Djuna Barnes, Emma Goldman, and the fact that she had this affair with Samuel Beckett, who she says was actually one of her most favorite male writers. So she thought, well, why not? Let me write this love story about her and Samuel Beckett, as well as parts of her life. She also says that there's many myths about Peggy Guggenheim. I think I've heard people talking about this at the beginning before we started, that she was like a terrible mother, she was some sex-starved, kooky socialite. But Rebecca Godfrey says she didn't see her that way at all. So she really wanted to tell her story. So if you think about it, she didn't want to do writing for magazines, and that investigative reporting, but it's sort of like she came back to that because she had to do all this research in order to be able to write her story. So it sort of comes back to her original roots of doing a lot of investigation. The author's books, Torn Skirt, Water Under the Bridge, and now Peggy, have centered around very unconventional, unruly female characters, if you want to put it that way. So my question for you is, do you consider, especially if somebody read the book and all that I've told you so far, would you consider Peggy Guggenheim to be the anti-heroine?
Well, because she was so eccentric, but she was also very wealthy.
Yes, yes,
So she could do what she wanted.
yes, exactly.
They do go hand in hand often, don't they? Eccentricity and wealth
Yeah.
and power.
There's a part at the beginning of the book where she goes to the typing school, And you can see the underlayer of that. And the women who are in the typing class have to be there, right? Middle class people. And she showed up in her pearls and her fur lined coat and, well, what do you think is gonna happen? So she's like, obviously, there's that element of the Jewish identity, but it's very much underneath. The first layer, I would argue, is the layer of the wealth, and I can do what I want. And that's great that she wanted to do something different with her life, but the other women are like, I have to be here. You don't have to be here. It was very interesting, and she doesn't understand why all the other women in the class are treating her poorly. That could possibly be why. It's in this book, at the beginning in part 1. Yeah. So one of the interviews that I was able to find with Rebecca Godfrey, she does say that she does tend to think that Peggy Guggenheim was totally the anti-conservative. She says, I don't think that there are many ethnic books about women moving through history. I think of the movie Aviator as model stories about these legendary American men. Her story is intertwined with these great moments of social change from the Titanic through anarchism and modernism, Hitler and the American post-war exuberance. She was very unconventional in her time and within her milieu as the daughter of a very powerful upper-class Jewish family. As a teenager, she was shaving off her eyebrows and working at a downtown bookstore. I just want to see if I can get this going for you. It's so difficult to find anything with the author's voice. Oh, first, first. I want to play you a short clip of Leslie Jamison speaking about the idea of the anti-heroine, which I thought was really interesting for your preface that way.
Well, it's not showing us the ad, so that's nice.
I don't think I'm gonna get the problem.
You hold up the mic.
Oh. Gonna get some of the speakers. Sorry about that. Time to get the cookies.
Yeah.
A snack break.
I saw it. I didn't know. Oh, gosh, and it's back. There aren't no. Yeah. Yeah, they're like, my husband's not well. They're not. Yes.
Are they older than Peggy? If anybody wants anything, you can email me after the fact. Yeah, so sorry about that, technical difficulties. Yeah. Wasn't bad. It's bad. Yeah. Yeah, well, for it. Okay, well, that's all that. I'll let you know. So sorry about that. That wasn't gonna play. It was just very interesting about her thoughts or Leslie Jamison's thoughts about the anti-heroine. Apparently, they met at Columbia University. That's where the two of them met. And Rebecca Godfrey was so interested in this idea of the anti-heroine that, in short, she actually taught a seminar for other writers, and all of them wanted to take it. So I'll just move on to the next one. The novel explores many different themes: identity, reinvention, grief, and loss. Some of these I've mentioned before as we've gone through. Loneliness and isolation, coming of age and discovery, and the power of storytelling and imagination. Rebecca Godfrey was known for her meticulous research in all her works, and Peggy is no exception. She immersed herself in extensive historical research, pulling from biographies, letters, interviews, in order to bring Peggy's world to life with rich and authentic details. As already mentioned, Godfrey studied Peggy Guggenheim's autobiography, Out of the Century, which pulls from Peggy's personal thoughts and relationships and her artistic vision. To make her world feel further authentic, Godfrey probably researched the art movements of the earliest 20th century, so surrealism, Dadaism, and abstract expressionism, as well as cultural and political movements of the time, especially as they affected women. The result is that the conversations feel authentic, as if they're taken straight from that time period. The historical details, so the location, the fashion, the political movements are all precise and immersive. So it's almost like Rebecca Godfrey wasn't just writing historical fiction. She was actually reconstructing an entire intellectual and artistic world for you, the readers. The ending of Peggy is both poignant more technical difficulties. The ending of Peggy was both poignant and thought-provoking, bringing together the novel's central themes of freedom, identity, love, self-reinvention. Without giving away too many spoilers, the conclusion serves as a culmination of Peggy's struggles, her search for artistic and personal independence, her fraught relationships, and her attempt to define herself outside societal and familiar expectations. Ultimately, Peggy is a novel about someone finding themselves. I think it is really important to say that this book is not only a part of Peggy's legacy, it's part of Rebecca Godfrey's legacy, because both of them are no longer with us today. To conclude, let's finish with the question that we started with. What is art? For me, it's most likely not going to be the iconic Campbell's soup cans by Andy Warhol, but for Peggy Guggenheim, it likely was. Similarly, a satirical piece entitled America by Italian conceptual artist Maurizio Cattelan that you can see on the screen would align with her artistic vision of art. The work was actually displayed in the Guggenheim Museum in 2016. Peggy probably would have adored this piece because it humorously critiques excessive wealth. Weighing over 250 pounds and valued at $3.6 million at the time, it wasn't just any art installation. As you can see on the screen, there is toilet paper hanging there. There is a garbage. The artist actually did replace the toilets in the fourth floor museum at the time. And the museum goers were actually invited to use the golden toilet bowl. So it just proves once again how subjective art can actually be. What some see as a joke, others may view as a statement on society's obsession with wealth. And just as a funny side note before we end, after a stint in the museum, the golden toilet was moved to the Valentine Palace in England, which is the birthplace of Sir Winston Churchill. In a bizarre twist of fate, a thief named Michael Jones stole the golden toilet bowl in 2025, which was valued then at $6 million. Jones decided to use it the day before the heist while casing the palace. In court later, he described the experience as splendid. So from its debut as an art installation in the Guggenheim Museum to its audacious theft, I'm sure Peggy Guggenheim would be sort of laughing down at the absurdity of all. That's all I have to say about Peggy.
I'm just imagining someone exiting with a golden toilet from a museum. Can't be light. I'm sure it's very heavy.
18-karat gold.
So he was caught.
You said 200.
You said 2025, so
He was
it's
caught.
just recently.
Yeah, it's like yeah.
He was
Yeah,
caught
there
in
was an
deep.
article about it.
Yeah.
He was caught. He cased the palace the night before. But can you imagine stealing 18 or 215 pound golden
No.
toilet, 18-karat gold out? And so, yes, he and his accomplices were caught, and I mean, you gotta give him points for trying.
Yeah, but
Thanks for trying.
I really like the cover. I thought it was really well done. It's so colorful.
Yeah.
And her name is prominent.
When I picked up the novel, like you, I had difficulty getting into it. Then, of course, because we had committed to the titles, I was like, okay, I really have to put something together to be able to give this presentation. And I did all this research, and what struck me the first time I read it, it is a very short book for historical fiction. And sometimes historical fiction suffers from being dense, laborious, and long-winded and slow. And she doesn't do that for you. She doesn't explain a lot of the historical stuff. She allows you, the reader, to sort of absorb it organically. And sometimes readers don't appreciate that, like you want the explanation. So when I went and did all the research for this, it was fascinating. You think Harold Lowe, for example, is just a name drop. He appears literally on 3 pages in the book. He has this whole other backstory, which is why he's important to be in the book. So when I reread it with all this other information in hand, I was like, oh, it's so much more interesting now. So hopefully, Carol, I convinced you to try and get through part 1. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
It's saying that she slept with 1,000 men.
Something like that. There's like all lots. There's a lot. Mark Rothko, yeah, no, it was Mark, no, Jackson Pollock has known for saying something along the lines, I was hoping to get this right.
Yeah.
I'd have to put a bag over her head to do it. He was one of the few men who was like, no, I'm not interested in having an affair with her, a sexual relationship with her, but
Allegedly.
yes, allegedly, right? You know, so that's what he says. But yes.
Maybe
there
she
was
turned
a
him
lot.
down and he never got over it.
That's why she wittingly said in that interview, when she was asked how many husbands did you have, I know of 3 that she had. She wittingly replies, do you mean mine or other people's? And it's like, oh.
Amazing answer.
It is.
And
She, very, or she was cremated, I think,
that's right.
with her dogs, but what about her children?
Unfortunately, it's very tragic. The daughter committed suicide later in life.
Rebecca's daughter?
No,
No,
Peggy,
no.
so Peggy Guggenheim. Yeah. So that marriage was really tumultuous. And so by the end, when they eventually separated, the reason why I think they were able to separate is he took the son, she took the daughter. And in one of the historical interviews, and again, as Maria rightly points out, allegedly, she says something along the lines of, and this is, I think, about Keegan, I would give you up in a heartbeat for like, a Picasso or something. And you don't know, like, you think, oh, she really saying that for real? No parent can really say that for real, but then the fact that the comment is out there, you're like, well, how do I interpret the statements? So, I think I like to think that she realized, especially later on in life, that she wishes that she had had a better relationship with her children. But it was, in order to be able to separate the veil, he took the son and she took the daughter, and her life was filled with all these events and parties and building her collection. Doesn't leave a lot of time for a daughter. You go on ski trips, is your mother really there? Are they not there? So she also had this sort of fragile personality, and then yes,
Did the daughter die before her?
the daughter died before her. Yeah, I believe so, yes.
And yet she's
It's very,
related with her dog.
yes, yes. And
I
if
mean,
you
I guess
see on the
related
back
with the
part,
daughter.
on the back part of your flyer, there's a picture on the very, very back. Go right to the end, yeah, she's actually on there, on her privately owned gondola, and those are her dogs, those are some of her dogs. And those are, her babies. So, should all people be parents?
Certainly not.
Yeah, so that's, but again, she's a product of the time where you're expected to get married and have a family and be the homemaker. And I'd like to think, the shaving off of the eyebrows and finding the job at the bookshop, maybe she realized early on, this is not for me. And then when I had the children, well, it wasn't as great as I thought it was gonna be. And unfortunately, treatment, if you get to the scene where Vail was with her, they're walking down the street or something, and they're getting into a bit of an argument. And he basically takes her and rips away the money, sort of throws the money down and burns the money. And the Parisians are like, oh no, monsieur, monsieur, and they're like, they care more about the money that's burning rather than the fact that he's pushed her down into the street and sort of walked away from her. So, yeah. That's the expectation at the time, is that you're supposed to have a family, you're supposed to want to have a family, you're supposed to want to be the traditional role of a female, and she's like, no, I don't really want this. Yeah, and it's quite tragic because also what happens to her sisters is quite tragic. If you know the story of her sisters, that's why at one point she says we're cursed. The three daughters of the Silver Prince, first the father will die, then the sisters will die, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, it's quite tragic.
Is there a book about it?
It's in one of the nonfiction books. It's well documented. You can pick them up and you can see. And then her sister, one sister couldn't have children, was desperate to have children, had many miscarriages, and then finally unfortunately passed because it was just too much for her. And then the youngest daughter, Hazel, had 2 sons. And there's this whole mystery, well documented, about what happened to the nephews because they committed suicide too off the top of their apartment in New York. And she was up there with them. So their whole mystery was, well, did she do something or did the kids do something? So there's this whole mystery about that as well. So it's very,
Were they 3 years old?
no, I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think they were too old, but I don't think they were super, super young either. So there's this whole thing about like yeah, so it was not an easy childhood, it was not an easy life, that's for sure not.
Thanks very much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, very.
I try to, the object of these things is to try not to give away too much of the book, but then you also want to fill the hours. So I try to focus a little bit on the art and the historical things in there that when you're reading it for the first time, you're like, oh, Harold Lowe, oh, Jean Cocteau, okay, fine, that's great. And then you read and then you're like,
Her mother spoke 3 times, has said the same thing 3 times over, or someone once said.
could very well be.
She repeated everything 3 times, and her sister only saying.
Was it like an OCD thing?
Around me.
Could very well be.
Because they didn't have like very good diagnoses of mental health
Yeah.
issues at the time.
No.
So if there was sort of a genetic, and it sounds
Yes.
like there was.
after, you know, the emotional illness.
Yes,
But they just didn't know, especially in those days.
No.
And even today, they don't know.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the sister who died, I think, I can't remember the number in the book, but it was not just 1 or 2 miscarriages, it was like 5 or 6, and then they even told her, like, you really shouldn't be pregnant anymore, this is going to be, very, very difficult for you, and she ended up passing because of it, so, yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of trauma, a lot of suffering, in that story.
Well, today we're much more aware of the genetic illnesses, but they can't seem to do very much for it.
No, and at the time, she says, for all of her sexual escapades, she hated the fact that she looked a certain way. And I mean, if you want to say she was a rebel in trying to do this, rhinoplasty at the time was really, really in its infancy. And she decided she hated her nose so much that she was going to go and have this plastic surgery done. And it was so terrible because, as you said, it didn't really know anything at the time. And it was so painful that they had to stop the operation sort of halfway through. But she so hated what she looked like in this film that she was willing to put herself through that, which not many people at the time probably would.
What year was this done?
Oh, way back, early years.
All this happened.
Yeah. Yeah. 30s and 20s.
Yeah. I think it was very important. I don't know, someone asked me why. Where so many. Sometimes people don't have emotional knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there isn't, and it's quite terrible because a lot of people sort of suffer and there's no research or there's no even acknowledgement. Because it's clear that the daughter had a lot of emotional, she was very, very fragile. And yeah, and then she decided that I'm going to, she's a girl life. Yeah.
When you see it, you know, you feel so but you
Yeah. And her first husband, Laurence Vail, had his own issues as well, clearly volatile. You know, his father was a very well-renowned, I can't remember his name, but landscape artist. And I'm sure the way he's portrayed this didn't have a long time for his child either. Like, I'm traveling, I'm painting, I'm this and that. So you're left abandoned. And then you're sort of either raising yourself or you're being raised by nannies. And well, that leads to a whole other slew of problems. Yeah.
I mean, it's actually surprising she only had 2 children.
Yeah.
I don't think access to contraception was,
I think because he was just really so volatile that at one point,
no, but just given the claims of how many people she had been with,
oh yeah,
she's lucky that she only had 2.
oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, yes, yes. And in the story, there's even another man sort of introduced, John Holm, I think his name is, and she started seeing him while she was still married with Laurence Vail. And then when he discovered that she was with John Holm, that blew up as well. You can imagine how well that went. So, yeah. A lot of artists, writers, that typical artist sort of behavior, but
The leaf in the wind.
yes, yes, yes. So thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming, everybody. There's still cookies if you'd like to grab some.
Thank you.